Hello, welcome back to Rev Endurance Sports and another edition of what is in our stand today. My name is George. I will be your host for the next few minutes, and I thank you for coming to my channel and coming to this video. And if you have subscribed, I thank you very much. But those that haven't subscribed, please show some love, subscribe to the channel, like the video, and of course, click that little notification bell so that you know when I've posted another video. We're trying to grow this channel, so we've got about 200 or something, 213 or something subscribers, and we'd really like to get to 1,000 subscribers. So please do what you can to support the channel. Okay, what we're going to talk about today is the SRAM Guide RS brake system. And I've had a couple of these come through, and especially during the lockdown period. At the time of filming this, it is now the first week of April of 2021. And during this time frame last year, April and May, June, we got a lot of bikes that had been sitting around for quite some time. And so customers were calling, and they needed a brake bleed, or the brakes weren't functioning, and all kinds of issues with their brakes. And the Guide RS system, going back to about 2017, they had some issues with them. So they were running, for 2 years, they were running a warranty replacement. But this bike now being 2021, we're outside of that 2-year time frame. But the problem was inside the lever body. And when this bike came in, the gentleman told me he and his friend tried to do a brake bleed on this bike several times. It took them some time. They still couldn't get it. And then they brought it to me. They said, well, I need an expert to help me. And so whenever I hear that, I know that something probably went wrong, because most people, if you watch enough YouTube videos, like let's say mine, you can get a lot of things done without needing to take stuff to a bike shop. Of course, I prefer that bikes come into me so that I have dealer support on these products. So let me grab the camera and we will take a look at this system. So there are a few things that led me to believe that I was having a problem doing the brake bleed. And the most important thing that was happening was when I first tried to push the pistons in, they would just not retract. And it was so difficult to do that. And I thought it took an inordinate amount of effort. And I tried, once I pushed them in, I tried to do the brake bleed, but it just didn't seem right. So I called SRAM tech support, and it turns out that the serial number for this brake system was an issue. So what we have is a new set of levers on the workbench. So here it is, Guide RS, and let's walk over to the workbench. And let's talk about some of the things that you might need to do this type of job. So initially, when I was attempting to just do the brake bleed, I had to push the pads back in because, well, new pads back in, and pardon me again, the pistons back in because the brake pads were so worn. So you need a tool like this, or sometimes you use a spanner wrench of sorts, just because you're trying to not damage any of the you're trying not to damage the pistons. And this has a nice rubber coating on it, so it kind of helps protect that. But as I said, the pistons would not retract, and that should have been my first sign that something was wrong, but we kept going. All right, so what we need to do this job is we need an 8mm flare nut wrench. We need a T8, and I'll show you what we use that for. And then we need a crow's foot set to 8 Newton meters. So this is easy to remember for me. T8 and 8 Newton meters. So that's easy to remember. Okay. You may have to readjust the brake caliper once everything is put back together. And then you need this 2.5mm to remove the bolt that holds the brake pads in there. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're just going to simulate briefly what you do for these types of brakes. This is the Stealth-O-Majig setup. So this is obviously a cable operated brake line, okay? But what you do is you take this and we simulate that this is a hydraulic brake line. It's really having trouble focusing on that. But you take this barb, this hose barb, and with this grease, you put a little dab of grease on there, and you screw that in with this T8 into that hydraulic hose. Then you take this compression fitting with, and if you look closely, there are two. Both ends are different. So one has a double step, and so let's say the left side has a double step and the right side has a single step. The single step will go towards the hose, and the double step will go towards the inside of the brake lever. So you tighten down that barb right there, and then the compression fitting is reverse threaded. Okay, that goes on, and then the hose goes back into the lever body, and then you torque it down, the compression nut, with your crow's foot. Okay, now you may, like in this particular job, since this was already an operating system, we're going to have to cut off the old a portion of the hose that has the compression fitting and the hose barb. We're going to have to cut that off. And so the SRAM recommends that you use one of their hose cutters. This is the Shimano one. It's fine. You just need something really sharp, and this has a razor blade in there. And I kind of like this compression fitting setup, the Stealth-O-Majig, because for the Shimano style, you have to take this tool and you put the hose in here, you put the hose barb in, but it's not threaded like this. So when you put the hose barb in, you have to press it into place with this tool. And if there's any hydraulic fluid or anything laying around or on the hose, it gets slippery in multiple attempts. So I think this Stealth-O-Majig setup is a little bit easier to get it done properly. Now, when you tighten down this hose barb into the hose, you got to make sure you don't tighten it too much, because then you'll mess up the hose liner, and then not too loose, because any type of gap between that head right there and the hose any type of gap could create some air leakage. Okay, this dot grease, very important to have. This will probably last me 10 years because you just need a tiny little dab every time you do one of these systems. Make sure that if you're doing SRAM systems, that you're using a dot fluid. Do not use mineral oil, and 5.1, okay? So there are the new levers that we're going to put on there. These are the old pads. This is the brake block that you're going to use. And this system is what they call the bleeding edge system. So you will need this bleeding edge adapter that you put onto your syringes right there. Now, whenever I have whether it be a brake service like this, or when I'm just replacing pads, I always take some Q-tips. I clean off the pistons before I push them back into the caliper. And the reason I want to do that is I want to remove any dirt, any grime, any brake dust from being pushed into the caliper. And you know, sometimes you'll have some stiction in the brake pistons. They just won't retract all the way, and you know, you might as well, you got the pads out, you have easy access to it. So I use some Q-tips and I clean everything with alcohol, and then put it all back together with the new pads and everything else, and everything seems to work so much better. Okay, so once you do all of this, you will still need to do a brake bleed, because obviously this is open air right now. There's no fluid in these reservoirs, so you're going to have to get a brake bleed process going. That's why all these other tools are here, the syringes and the bleeding edge tool. And then that should do it for this particular bike, and then new pads as well, because they were completely worn, but I think I already covered that. Okay, so thank you so much for tuning in. I do appreciate all of those that do subscribe to the channel and who watch my videos. Of course, there are people that have not subscribed, and you know, I'd appreciate it if you would, and that'll free up more of my time in the future to create more videos. Okay, thank you so much. Please like, subscribe, share, and hit that notification bell. And in the meantime, we'll see you up the road.